A study from the Central Statistics Office has found that less than half of people in Ireland say that they trust the government, and only about a quarter of people in Ireland trust political parties. Now, this is despite the fact that generally our level of trust in each other, our neighbours, our friends, our family, is relatively high. So we seem to hold, Shane, politicians, governments, political parties in a special place in our minds that basically they're almost automatically untrustworthy. What do you make of it?
I find it kind of sad and I find it depressing. Look, politicians are not perfect. Political parties are not perfect. Populism is rife. But I actually think I think we live in one of the most benign democracies, one of the most benign countries in the world. And I think politicians, for all their flaws, and this isn't whether they're government or opposition, I think it's regardless of who is in government, I think genuinely try to do their best for the citizen. They're not out to do us. They're not out to do us down. We've seen examples of it in the last couple of days. Look at what happened when with Tory Towie, the woman in Dubai. Like, it was an opposition figure that brought it to light. Mary Lou McDonald raised it in the Dáil. Simon Harris and Micheál Martin ran with it, and within hours her situation was vastly improved. Like, politicians try and do their best for people. And I never understand. We have this huge suspicion they're all out to get us. They're all trying to line their own pockets. I mean, there's one thing in here. One of the things, 3 in 5 thought it was unlikely a senior politician would refuse a well-paid private sector job in exchange for a political favour. I mean, that thing that they're all at it. There's no actual basis for that. And we saw it also with the debate on the public services card. I mean, people were saying, I don't know, the state is out to get me. The state will be watching me. Like, they've no problem with their mobile phone, with
Tracking their every move.
every move.
With their club card.
But when one of the most benign states in the world wants to just give you a card that will allow public services to work better, there's immediately, and a lot of journalists led this as well. I don't get where it's coming from. I think it's sad. I think it undermines our democracy. And I'm not saying we have to be accept everything the government says or everything politicians say. Of course we don't. We should be questioning and stuff. But I don't doubt that ultimately their motives are decent and honourable.
I think that's fair, and I think the abuse that they suffer is unjustified. I heard Michael Healy-Rae speaking yesterday about the abuse he suffered online, where his own mum, his late mum, was abused online, and there is awful things. And I do not for one moment subscribe to the notion that, you see it, that they're repeatedly traitor, everyone from Mary Lou McDonald to, it doesn't matter what political aspect of the house you seem to be on, Mary Lou McDonald to Micheál Martin, they're all traitors. I don't mean they are, by the way. They're certainly not. But that's what's being said about them. I don't know where this is coming from. I think social media probably feels the narrative. I do think the media, I think the faux outrage sometimes in the media, and I say this as someone who's new-ish still to the media, is kind of nonsense.
Interviewers play a role. Yeah. It's the gotcha moment, trying to catch out a politician always.
Now, I think things like COVID probably didn't help people. People felt that and I'm one of the people who, I put up my own hand and say I was worried that we were moving in slightly autocratic ways that were unnecessary, and that government were moving in an extraordinary way at times. And I get
but
that.
But their intentions were, whether you agreed or
I think their intentions
disagreed,
were largely good.
They weren't doing it because they wanted to control us.
Largely good. I think that there's something interesting in this too, because men apparently trust the government more than women, and I suspect you are slightly more trusting of them than I am, even though I absolutely recognise we live in a benign democracy, and that this is more or less as good as it gets in terms of democracy.
This isn't the
I
UAE.
think we need to keep an eye on everybody.
It's not America even. I mean, I like all the institutions of the state, I believe are benign.
I do think sometimes we adopt narratives here that we've seen online that may apply to other countries. So things like, I remember about 10 years ago, you started to see people here accusing each other of white privilege when actually the vast majority of the country was white, and therefore that privilege was not really an issue at that time. But it was because they'd seen it elsewhere. And I think that we are feeding narratives. And I just wonder, I think it is sad, I think you're right, but I wonder what it all means. I'd love to know this morning, why is it that we trust each other but we don't trust politicians? And why is it that even in this country, where we are relatively, as Shane has said, a benign liberal democracy with functioning institutions of the state that support people's rights, Why don't we trust each other? Why don't we trust our government? Let us know. 087 1400 106.
Now, let's turn back to that study from the CSO. Less than half of people say they trust the government. Just 1 in 4 trust political parties. We're joined by the psychotherapist and author of What Your Teen is Trying to Tell You, Stella O'Malley. Stella, I have to say, I found this result profoundly depressing.
Yeah, actually, so did I. I think the kind of lack of faith people have in the government and in the institutions was quite revealing, and it is reflected when you speak to people, and when you talk to different people, you realise that there's been a kind of distinct change in our attitudes, so that news has turned into almost, people say that's your opinion. I know when I work with young people, they're getting their news from TikTok, and it's very curated. And so it feels like, well, that's not actually the news, I might say, because I'm of, a different generation. And they're like, oh, no, I saw it on TikTok. And arguably in the last 10 years, there's been a big shift with Donald Trump and the fake news era came in. At the same time, social media arrived and started producing content, which is very news-focused but wrapped up in entertainment. And then on top of that, when COVID came, there was a lot of people who started to significantly lose trust in what the government were saying, what the news outlets were saying, like the public broadcast, RTE News were saying, and seeing it more as opinion rather than news. And I think that has really shaped people.
Was there any validity to that? Like, I understand people disagreed with lockdowns and so on. I get that, and some of the arguments that were made were entirely legitimate. But the conspiracy theories that it fostered were off the wall.
Absolutely, they were extraordinary. What I'm talking about was the destabilizing feeling of people trying to frantically, in a very kind of heated atmosphere, find out what's going on, and different countries having different rules and different attitudes. So it was very hard to actually figure out, was Australia doing it right? Was America doing it right? Was it Sweden? Was Ireland? Who was doing it right? So it became a very, news is depending on who is delivering it. So I'm not propagating theories here. I'm saying it was destabilizing for people who want a solid ground, that they just look to the governmental institutions, they look to public service broadcasting for definitive facts. And it feels like that solid ground has been destabilized. Hence, if you look at the stats there, 80% of people not really trusting the governmental institutions and authorities.
I found it amazing during the whole debate about the public services card, which I thought was blown out of all proportion, not least by journalists, I have to say. Like, people are quite happy for their phones to be tracked. Like, every movement they make are tracked by big business. Big business who don't really care, about Stella O'Malley or Shane Coleman. And yet, we felt the public services card, a lot of people felt, was like the government's way of tracking us, of kind of using information against us. I just don't understand where that comes from, I have to say.
Well, it's such a good point you make, and I can't help but think that the other side, the corporates that are tracking us, the Facebooks, the Metas, and whatever, well, they are making money. So it's within their business model to make sure that their business model is more believable than the governmental one. So it makes sense. It feels very us and them, and I feel like social media as a kind of entity is winning, if you follow me, because people curate
no, I agree.
With the algorithms. It's shaped to each person's bias. So I was reading an article today, and I thought to myself, "Oh my God, I've really gone down a rabbit hole." It's so easy to kind of keep on pressing, and you end up really quite deep into places quite quickly. And every single algorithm is individualized. It's frightening how much we're being shaped, and we're ending up completely believing what we want to believe, which is the social media feed, rather than the kind of neutral news that has been given out by, like I say, public service or less interested media.
Right. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Stella O'Malley, psychotherapist, author of What Your Teen is Trying to Tell You. Thank you indeed for talking to Newstalk Breakfast.